Has there ever been a historic figure or culture that has had extraterrestrial contact or origin, from your knowledge, from your vast years of study? Is there one figure who stands out above them all?
All these volumes along here are classical Greek studies, and this shelf here is on Pythagoras. And there's about 50, 60 volumes on Pythagoras here. This is a biography of Pythagoras by Peter Gorman, published in England in 1979. And he records in here that the Pythagoreans in general believed that all the planets in the solar system were inhabited, the dwellers on the earth being the most backward and pernicious of the lot. The farther one went from the earth, the more perfect the beings of the other planets and stars became. And Pythagoras and Plotinus went so far as to say that the beings who dwell in the distant Milky Way are almost disembodied intelligences and possess a very tenuous physical body. And that, as we have seen in the biography, the classic biography by a disciple of Plotinus, Jamblichus, was that Pythagoras might have been one of the superior beings who inhabited the moon or beyond. And the more intelligent beings inhabit the regions beyond the earth, and if someone can purify his psychic vehicle, consisting of an intelligible substance akin to light, but on earth is commingled with other elements, if he can purify that back into a superlight, he can journey to the stars and beyond to join these intelligences. This is the fundamental reason for all the purifications of the Pythagorean way of life and philosophy, to return to the ether where one can attain a cosmic divinity. Thus, the whole universe for Pythagoras was inhabited by beings, some more or less material with bodies of fire or air, some immaterial, who were superior to men and who sometimes guided them. Astraeus was one of these beings. Evidently, Astraeus was, as close as we can discern, a child from another species from elsewhere.
And what did he teach Pythagoras about how they travel from?
They were able, I think, in growing up, just to convey to Pythagoras that there were cosmic dimensions to being, and not just social, and not just geographically limited. And this made Pythagoras the wisest man of his time in the Mediterranean region. He was a contemporary of the Buddha in India and of Lao Tzu in China.
And Roger noticed that in the Phoenix Lights case, that these giant triangular, the key operating word here meaning triangular UFO, it stops right in front of the Estrella mountain range. And Estrella in Spanish and Latin means star. So Star Mountain was the name that the ancient, early American Spanish settlers gave to the mountain in Phoenix, the Star Mountain. So why does the triangular UFO stop there when, there's a connection to the heavens or the stars with this mountain? Were they symbolically trying to say something? And even further, Roger Weir notices that Astraeus in Greek is actually the star child, the stepbrother of Pythagoras, and he tells us the story. So is there a connection to Pythagoras with these giant triangular UFOs? Well, once again, we think of these are a 5,000 foot wide triangular UFO. It's not a formation. We know from the eyewitnesses that said that the whole triangle blacked out the stars, so it's not a formation. The question is, are these extraterrestrials trying to tell us something? Is there a connection? Because what is Pythagoras famous for more than anything else?
And here's the famous Pythagorean triangle, where the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the square of the two sides. one of the great discoveries of mathematical proportions. And up above here, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's the tetrachus, the triangle, the pyramid of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and their ratios, which give us an index and a key beginning for all of the proportions that characterize the existential world. And here, of course, is the key transposed to music, and it's the harmonics of Pythagoras that are the basis of Western music.
Between the 6th and 5th century BC, Greek mathematician Pythagoras began speaking of his musica mundana, that is to say, the music of the universe. It was a concept that later became known as music of the spheres. In this concept, he speculated that the 6 known planets produced a kind of music, a heavenly music, as they went through their orbits, and that this heavenly music was in direct relation to the intervallic relations in music. Pythagoras is also well known for having established the ratios which make up our intervallic system of music. That is to say, a 2-to-1 ratio is what we call an octave. A 3-to-2 relation is what we call a perfect fifth. A 4-to-3 relationship is a perfect fourth. A 5-to-4 relationship is a major third, and so on. These relationships, Pythagoras theorized, were in direct relation to the planets which we knew of at the time.
Astraeus, his adopted brother, was not the only being from another world whom Pythagoras encountered.
Are the ancient architects, have they returned? Are they trying to tell us something here? Is it so subtle that this went over everybody's heads? Nobody knew about it until now? I think the connection is amazing. I don't think we're pulling too far here to go this far to say that, because if you really think about it, where did Pythagoras learn the triangular theorem? Who were his teachers? He studied in ancient Egypt and Alexandria, and also in Babylon. So when you think of the ancient architects of Egypt, what did they build? They built pyramids. They built all the great pyramids. So have the great stone masters return.
Let's go to ancient Greece, to the time of Pythagoras, the master egghead of them all.
Pythagoras?
The father of mathematics and music.
Mathematics and music?
Ah, you'll find mathematics in the darndest places. Watch. First, we'll need a string. Stretch it good and tight, plunk it. Now divide in half. Plunk again. You see? It's the same tone, 1 octave higher. Now divide the next section. And the next. Pythagoras discovered the octave had a ratio of 2-to-1. With simple fractions, he got this. And from this harmony in numbers developed the musical scale of today.
By golly, you do find mathematics in the darndest places.
You can imagine how excited Pythagoras was when he shared his findings with his pals, a fraternity of eggheads, known as the Pythagoreans. They used to meet in secret to discuss their mathematical discoveries. Only members were allowed to attend. They had a secret emblem, the pentagram. Let's see what the topic is for today.
Well, I'll be a postgraduate fan.
It was our old friend Pythagoras who discovered that the pentagram was full of mathemagic. The 2 shorter lines combined exactly equal the third. And this line shows the magic proportions of the famous golden section. The second and third lines exactly equal the fourth. Once again, we have the golden section. But this is only the beginning. Hidden within the pentagram is a secret for creating a golden rectangle, which the Greeks admired for its beautiful proportions and magic qualities. The star contains the golden rectangle many times over. It's a most remarkable shape. It can mathematically reproduce itself indefinitely. All these rectangles have exactly the same proportions. This figure also contains a magic spiral that repeats the proportions of the golden section into infinity. To the Greeks, the golden rectangle represented a mathematical law of beauty. We find it in their classical architecture. The Parthenon, perhaps one of the most famous of early Greek buildings, contains many golden rectangles. These same golden proportions are also found in their sculpture. In the centuries that followed, the golden rectangle dominated the idea of beauty in architecture throughout the Western world. The Cathedral of Notre Dame is an outstanding example. The Renaissance painters knew this secret well. Today, the golden rectangle is very much a part of our modern world. Modern painters have rediscovered the magic of these proportions. Indeed, this ideal proportion is to be found in life itself.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is mathematics. I got mathematical figures like that.
Donald.
Let me try it.
No.
Ideal proportion.
Not quite. No, I'm afraid not. Well, we can't all be mathematically perfect.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I knew I could do it.
Now that you're all pent up in a pentagon, let's see how nature uses this same mathematical form. The petunia. The star jasmine. The starfish. The wax flower. There are literally thousands of members in good standing in nature's Pythagorean Society of the Star. All nature's works have a mathematical logic, and her patterns are limitless. The magic proportions of the golden section are often found in the spirals of nature's designs. The profusion of mathematical forms brings to mind the words of Pythagoras. Everything is arranged according to number and mathematical shape. Yes, there is mathematics in music, in art, in just about everything. And as the Greeks had guessed, the rules are always the same.
Individuality, the trademark of any artist, designer, or architect. Each desires a uniqueness to their creation, a quality that separates it from any other. Man naturally has this individuality, his fingerprint. There are 6.5 billion people on the face of the earth, and no two fingerprints are the same. Everything we touch or make contact with is branded with a small expressed image revealing to all who see it who was there. Around 1200 AD, a man named Leonard Pisano, better known as Fibonacci, discovered a sequence of numbers that created a very interesting pattern. The sequence begins with the numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and continues indefinitely. Each number is obtained by adding the last two digits together. A rectangle with a length and width of any two of the numbers of this sequence forms what is known as the golden rectangle, a perfect rectangle. A golden rectangle can be broken down into squares the size of the next Fibonacci numbers down and below. If we were to take a perfect or golden rectangle, break it down into smaller squares based on Fibonacci's sequence, and divide each with an arc, the patterns begin to take shape. We begin to see Fibonacci's spiral. The spiral in and of itself is insignificant. Its importance is revealed in where we find it. Take, for example, the sunflower. The display of its florets are in perfect spirals of 55, 34, and 21, the sequence of Fibonacci. The fruitlets of the pineapple create this same spiral based on the sequence. The pine cone does the same. As currents move through the ocean and the tide rolls onto the shore, the waves that bring in the tide curve into a spiral that can be mathematically diagrammed onto a plot at the points 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and 55. Buds on trees, sand dollars, starfish, petals on flowers, and especially the nautilus shell are formed with this exact same blueprint. With each segment of growth, the nautilus adds to itself one more value on Fibonacci's scale. This blueprint can be seen around us on a small scale every day, but the greatest example of all is directly above our heads. At an average of 100,000 light years across, even the spiral of the galaxies above us are formed with the exact design that the tiny shell is formed. This sequence or blueprint appears to be the trademark of a designer, a proof of a creator, something left behind indicating the one who was there, a fingerprint. As we scan our universe, from the tiny flower to the awe-inspiring galaxy, we see the fingerprint of God.
This is a water droplet that you're going to see. And in this water droplet, a frequency is being pumped into this water droplet. As the frequency is mirrored in the droplet, you'll actually see the geometric patterns in that droplet. Now what's happening, and the reason that this is so significant, is because we're going to do a frequency sweep. We're going to go from low frequencies to higher frequencies. And what you'll find is this. You'll see that in the lower frequencies, the patterns are less complex. And in the higher frequency, the patterns are more complex. So we're going through a sweep from lower to higher frequency. I'm sharing this with you now because Earth is essentially going through a frequency sweep. Our fundamental pulse, our base pulse that has hovered around 7.8 cycles per second, now is changing. And again, there's a lot of controversy about what the change is, and we're witnessing the change. As we go through our planetary shift of this pulse, patterns of energy must change to respond to that, just as patterns of energy in this water are changing to respond to this pulse. And we'll begin with simply the concentric patterns in the water. As the frequency begins, every once in a while we'll reach a key threshold resonance, such as that moment right there. And in that key threshold resonance, the entire pattern morphed into a more complex expression of itself, simply because the frequency changed. Now watch what happens. The frequency is still increasing. Now watch what happens. As we reach another key threshold resonance, this entire pattern will morph into a beautifully and more complex pattern of itself, again and again. And look at this pattern right here. Look what you're seeing right here. Look at the beautiful geometry. Here is a perfect cube. There's a perfect tetrahedron, a star tetrahedron. In 2 dimensions, we've got the octahedron. Very powerful images of sacred geometry held in place simply because we've achieved the vibratory pattern that allows that in this water droplet. And as the vibration increases, these patterns will become more and more complex. You can see the pulse from where you are. Can you see the pulse actually in the water? As we go into the last set of the frequencies, what you'll see is that the entire, and you'll watch along the outer perimeter, the entire pattern reaches its greatest level of complexity, and then it goes back. As the frequencies drop, it goes back to what it was, the concentric circles, as it was originally. It almost looks alive. You know, you've been offered many times the concept that thought is vibration. Have you ever considered that emotion is vibration? Feeling is vibration. We are always feeling something. We are always emoting something. We may not always be aware of what that is. We carry those patterns with us. As we hold a feeling and an emotion, what we're doing is we are holding a vibratory pattern in the liquid crystal of our bodies.
Has now been scientifically shown to be provable. And what you're going to see now are what happens to particles of sand and other various particles when a sound resonates across a plate and resonates those particles in tune with the sound. Because when we think, we're not just sending out a wave which resonates the energy, we're sending out on a frequency outside of the range of human hearing, we're sending out a sound. Everything is sound. When we think a sound goes out, it resonates the energy around us to that sound. And what you're about to see are some pictures that show this happening when sound is introduced, and how sound takes random particles and turns it into astonishing form. And that's how this universe was created. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sound. So what you're looking at here is merely particles formed into patterns by sound. They were all over the place to start with, just in random positions on the plate. As soon as the sound appears, they form into these patterns, because everything is sound, and it is sound that turns matter and energy into form. Patterns on wings of birds and insects are all the manifestation of the sound vibrations. Every organ in our body resonates to a certain frequency. And when our thoughts and emotions and stress and the vibrations that causes de-harmonize the vibrational state of our various parts of our body, we become ill. we think ourselves into illness because we're affecting the vibrational state of the body. And so every time you think and feel, you're resonating a frequency which is making the energy around you resonate to the same frequency. What you give out is what you create. Here you're seeing mini galaxies just formed by particles and sound. This is how the galaxies and the universe and the solar systems were formed and continue to be held in the structure they're in through sound. If the sound changes, the matter changes, the energy changes. So when you look at what it says in texts like even the Old Testament, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sound. And sound is everything. When you think and feel, you're creating sound. This is how the heart beats at a certain resonance. All you're looking at here are interacting frequencies making a beat. And so while the frequency of the heart is at the right level, it beats in the normal number of beats a minute. But when we become stressed, we affect that frequency and the heart beats faster. And so everything is sound, even the human heartbeat, and the interacting frequencies that make it happen. And we've seen the galaxies, and now here are the planets forming, just on a plate from particles caused by sound passing through them. This planet has a resonant frequency. It's called the Schumann cavity resonance. But basically, while that frequency holds, the planet will hold its present form. If the frequency changes, the form will change. It's the same with everything. And here you see sound being passed through ion filings and particles, and therefore creating form once again. And from these pictures, it's hardly difficult to see how the human body is formed through sound resonating energy, and how that physical form is held as long as that sound matrix is held. But once that changes, the physical body changes. So there you've seen, with stunning effect, how sound creates form, how galaxies are created, how planets are created. And all those planets, balls of particles, all those revolving galaxies were merely particles turned into that form by sound.
This next series of photographs are the work of Japanese researcher Mr. Masaru Emoto from his book, The Message from Water. Mr. Emoto's work provides factual evidence that human vibrational energy, thoughts, words, ideas, and music affect the molecular structure of water. Please remember that water comprises over 70% of a mature human body and covers the same amount on our planet. Water is the very source of all life. This photo shows the beautifully formed geometric design of the Yushi Spring water. This next photo is from the Shimanto River, the last clean spring in Japan. Notice the extraordinary geometric forms. The fact that the molecular structure of water can be affected by our consciousness, our intent, and our sounds is extremely important. This photo is from the Mount Cook Glacier in New Zealand. Mr. Emoto has been visually documenting these molecular changes in water by means of his photographic techniques. He freezes droplets of water, then examines them under a dark field microscope that has photographic capabilities. His work clearly demonstrates the diversity of the molecular structure of water and the effects of the environment upon the structure of the water. This photo is from the fountain in Lourdes, France. This photo is from contaminated water from the Yodo River in Japan. In this photo we can compare the contaminated water with clean stream water. Look at the difference. Mr. Emoto decided to see what effects music would have upon the structure of water. He placed distilled water between two speakers for several hours while playing different music and then photographing the crystals that formed after the water was frozen. This photo is of water being exposed to Beethoven's Pastorale. This photo is the effect of Bach's Air for the G-string on the water. This photo is water exposed to Chopin's Farewell Song. This next photo is water being exposed and affected to music that was designed for healing. This photo is of water being exposed to the Kawachi folk dance. This photo shows the effect of heavy metal music upon the water. Here now we can compare the effects of healing versus heavy metal music and what happens to the water molecules. Mr. Emoto decided to see how thoughts and words affected the formation of untreated distilled water crystals by typing words onto paper and then taping this paper onto glass bottles overnight. This photo shows the effects of the words, "Thank you." This next photo shows the effects of the words love and appreciation. This photo shows the effects of the words, "You make me sick, I will kill you." And here we can compare the effects of thank you with the "you make me sick, I will kill you." Very, very different geometric forms being incurred through the intention. Now this photo is of a very polluted and toxic water from the Fujiwara Dam. Here now is the same water from the Fujiwara Dam after a Buddhist monk had offered a prayer over it. Prayer, that sound coupled with intention, seems to have an extraordinary ability of restoring water to its natural, harmonious, geometric symmetry. And in this photo we can compare the toxic water and then the effects of praying over the water. It's really quite impressive. These photographs that we have just seen show proof that not only does sound have the ability of affecting and changing physical structure, but that with regard to the molecular structure of water, that our intent with our sound is extremely important. This may have great implications for the future of both personal and planetary harmony and healing.
To what extent is water capable of picking up information? What does it perceive? And how does it remember it over time?
The Aerospace Institute in Stuttgart has discovered a relatively simple way of making the structure of a drop of water visible. The researchers have had their efforts rewarded by insights into a very beautiful world. Each drop has a face of its own, unmistakable and unique. Why are the individual drops so different from one another? We got a lot of people to come to a lecture hall here at the Institute, gave them all the same water, had them make drops at exactly the same time, collected all the drops, and then discovered that each individual produced different images from the same water. And here you can see the results. Here on the right you can see that the images of the individual students are different, but those made by a given student are all quite similar. This is the work of the first experimenter, this one here from the second, this from the third, and this from the fourth. Individually they can quite easily be reproduced, but you would never have thought that they were all from the same water, because when you compare the images from the different people, you see some big differences. Then we undertook experiments to find out whether things changed when we put something into the water. A real flower was placed in the water. A while later we took a drop of water, and here you can see one of the pictures. And you can see it in this picture. It's the typical image you get when you put a flower into water. You could recognize the flower in every single drop in this glass, of course. That can be reproduced and has significance. And if you were to put a different flower in here, for example, a Sweet William flower, then all the drops of this water would look like Sweet William. The statement that water has a memory practically changes our whole way of looking at the world, of course. Let's travel down the Rhine in the figurative sense. The water is flowing down the Rhine, picking up information everywhere it goes. So the water has more information at the mouth of the Rhine than it had at the source. And the Dutch, living at the mouth, when they drink that water, they're also drinking all that information. Thus, the world's oceans would no longer be something that separates us, but instead a giant storehouse of information, and the rain would perhaps be a data medium carrying information to the world.
Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Take a look at our galaxy. There are 100 billion stars in our galaxy. Now take a look at the galaxies of the universe. We can actually count them. In the visible universe, our telescopes have the range to see 100 billion galaxies. Well, how many stars are there in the visible universe? Count them. 100 billion times 100 billion. That is an astronomical number. You have to be supremely arrogant to believe that we are the only ones in town.
Here we are 25,000 light years away from the center of our galaxy, and our galaxy is over 100,000 light years across. But even that, as large as it is kind of a speck in the cosmic distance scale.
Our Milky Way galaxy may appear big to us, But compared to some others out there, it's actually pretty small.
Invite you. Come around here. Let me have a look at you. My goodness, look at you. You turned out all right, didn't you? How do you feel? Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way.
You're not human, right?
Well, it's tough to get any more obvious than that.
If I had to guess, I'd say you're a program from the machine world. So is he.
So far, so good.
But if that's true, that can mean you're a part of the system. Another kind of control.
Keep going.
I suppose the most obvious question is, how can I trust you?
Bingo. It is a pickle, no doubt about it. Bad news is there's no way if you can really know whether I'm here to help you or not. So it's really up to you. Just have to make up your own damn mind to either accept what I'm going to tell you or reject it. Candy?
Family of light. Wake up.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
We have the power. We just need to take it back from this level of division, apartness, can'tness, to isness, I amness. I am all that is, ever has been, and ever will be-ness.
Some people might not know exactly who the Pleiadians were.
They're here to rescue the human beings who are being enslaved on this planet and forced into a paradigm of a super oligarchy.
This is the level of the transformation. This is the level of the revolution, if you want to call it that. It's not guns, it's consciousness.
What a mind child. So you're here to save the world. What do you say to something like that?
In order to walk among us, they disguised their appearance by cloning human flesh and their own reptilian skin. I thought everyone here was up to speed. But the visitors didn't just get here. They've been here for years.
This completion has been heralded by many for eons. What happens on Earth now will affect the entire universe.
Throughout time, there have been intersecting moments when the cycles of the great cosmic clocks line up in such a way that we're not only given a glimpse of all that is possible, but we actually have the opportunity to step beyond all that we have known as truth and participate in a grander truth within a higher level of consciousness. Consciousness, 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 consciousness.
Out of this vibrant nothingness emerged matter, energy, space, time, consciousness.
It was created by greed. And fear. We have to go beyond that.
And the people are starting to realize that they're all connected.
I was no longer a fragment of the universe. I was the universe.
As 6.2 plus billion people of the Earth witness unprecedented changes in their world.
More and more obvious to people that there's a shift going on, a planetary shift.
We are the generation of hope. We are the generation of hope. Another me, another dream.
You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today.
We'll keep track of that, buddy. That's great. Land off. Okay, Charlie, here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Quantum physics reveals that it's the invisible stimuli that are much more important. There's a simple quote by Albert Einstein that makes sense out of this, and the quote is, "The field is the sole governing agency of the particle." What Einstein meant by this very simply is the field, the invisible energy forces around us. They are the sole governing agencies of the particle, and the particles matter. And so quantum physics says the character of matter is ultimately determined by the field.
If we were ever going to interact with our bodies, if we want to heal our bodies, we want to create peace in our families or our communities, we must speak to the fields that connect all things. We must find a meaningful language, a non-verbal language that communicates with the stuff that this world is made of. The bottom line, the through line, is that they're all speaking about an experience, an inner experience that we have focused on our hearts. What the science now is showing is that those experiences extend beyond our bodies into the world around us, because the field of our heart is part of the world around us and connected with that field. So that when individuals can find a way to create coherence in their lives and become more cooperative, less aggressive, more willing to solve problems together, that experience is transmitted in this field and others begin to find the same experience just because they're in that field. They're in that field.
This chart shows a dotted line going up and down, which is the rise and fall on a daily basis of the number of people who are meditating as a group in Jerusalem. It's all on a volunteer basis. And the solid line represents progress towards peace in the war in neighboring Lebanon. And even before the benefit of statistical analysis, you can almost see from the raw data that progress towards peace, measured by reduced war deaths, reduced war injury, progress towards negotiated settlement among the rival factions. The progress towards peace goes up and down almost in lockstep with the number of people who are meditating as a group, radiating this influence of inner peace to become outer peace. When this was subject to mathematical analysis, the likelihood that this is simply due to some fluke, due to chance, is less than 1 part in 10,000, which for a social scientific experiment is extraordinary. To be able to say something with this certainty, that group meditation prevented war, that is a really remarkable finding. The likelihood that this reduction of war was again simply due to chance and not due to the meditating groups was less than 1 part in 10 million. There is far more evidence that group meditation can turn off war like a light switch than there is evidence that aspirin reduces headache pain. Aspirin reduces headache pain.
meditation can help us here at Occupy Wall. No problem can be solved at the level of consciousness at which the problem was created. Put your hand on your heart. And just ask yourself internally. What kind of world do I want to live in? I want to live in. I want to live in. Now ask yourself, how can I make that happen? How can I make that happen?
A question tonight, can you actually measure the emotional outpouring in a worldwide crisis?
Sometimes scientists think that they have done just that. Their machines and computers found a bizarre pattern right after several global disasters.
CBS 2's Brendan Keefe explains this phenomenon.
September 11th deeply affected people far beyond New York and Washington. The attack sent shockwaves around the world, a global reaction that triggered a spike in a network of scientific instruments, just like a seismograph during an earthquake.
Each of those showed a similar pattern of change during that day.
Retired Princeton scientist Dr. Roger Nelson believes the emotional focus of millions of people on a single event like 9/11 may form a global consciousness.
When we have a feeling in our hearts, we're creating electrical and magnetic waves inside of our bodies that extend beyond our bodies into the world around us. And what's so interesting is the research shows that those waves extend not just 1 meter or 2 meters, many, many kilometers beyond where our heart physically resides.